Hey, real quick, it'd be great if you could consider subscribing to the YouTube channel down below. It really helps us out.
Welcome to the Solid Verbal. And now, Dan and Ty.
Dan Rubenstein, welcome back. Happy New Year. We've got games to discuss. We've got bowl bingo to discuss. We've got college football abound here in the year of our Lord 2026, my good friend. Welcome back. How are you?
I'm great, though I did just discover and confirm that Blink-182 is now considered to be, everybody sit down now, classic rock.
What?
Classic
Is that true?
rock. So if you are looking at like the, what's my age again, all the small things era, you're talking about 1999. You're talking about 26 years ago. And so 1999 minus 26 is like 1973, right?
Oh, man.
Yeah, buddy. 20, which is, I think, how old most of Indiana's players are. Right? Aren't they in their like mid-20s? They've got a lot of 6th and 7th year guys.
Maybe
Riley
they were
Nowosky,
conceived during some of that great era of Blink-182 music.
I can only assume. Ty.
With it on in the back. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Maybe a little Pennywise going there. I don't know.
I'm Googling this now. It appears you are correct, sir. Good
Classic
hell.
rock.
Huh.
All right. And with that as the backdrop, Ty.
Well, you just sort of stole my thunder here. I was shot out of a cannon, ready to talk about a new year, a new semifinal, a new set of games here. But now I feel really old, older than before. Welcome back. Hit follow, hit subscribe. If that wasn't too much cold water for all y'all out there in the Verballer hood. Otherwise, please do check us out at verballers.com. By the way, as some are listening to this, as some are watching this, we are getting very close to crossing the 30,000 sub count.
Oh,
out on youtube.com/@solidverbal. We saw a nice little uptick through the playoffs, and we were working our butts off here to try and get stuff out as quick as we could. So if you've yet to do so, if you want to help support the team, please do hit the sub button out on the old YouTube and help us cross that next threshold. I don't know where it goes from here, but if we get to 30, sky's the limit, man. Sky's the limit.
Ty, if you really are feeling your age, you can always just do what Curt Cignetti does and brush a little bit of that Les Miles formula right in there. Nobody will be for the wiser. This morning.
You were doing a little bit of investigative work.
I think Curt Cignetti is the best. Truly, I do think he's the best. But I remember seeing older pictures of him and thinking like, oh, he kind of looked like an elder statesman when he was a head coach at some previous stops. And now he's dark. Dark.
I mean, he's got more money than Davy Crockett. He could do whatever he wants with his hair, right?
I have nothing but good things to say about Curt Cignetti. So far be it from me to criticize anybody's decisions with regard to their hair coloring. But that is an option for you. I'm just putting it in the context of that.
For me, thank you.
For you, if you're feeling old.
Yeah. Great.
That's it.
Well, we're off to a hot start here in 2026. Welcome, one and all. We've got 2 games to preview on today's episode. We're going to go through both CFP semifinal games. We are going to talk about the college football transfer portal madness here in the next day or so. We're going to split that off into its own episode, bring on an honored and distinguished guest to help us give you the lay of the land, talk through quarterback markets, talk through the calendar. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be unpacked with respect to the college football transfer portal. So we promise you we will do that in very, very short order, but we thought we would give both of these games their due and dedicate this episode solely to the college football playoff semifinals. That still track for you? You cool with that?
It does. I'm sorry if I get distracted, but I'm thinking about like what kind of rug Brendan Sorsby is going to put in his Gulfstream, right? Is he go more plush with it? Just more classic?
Did I see $5 million for Brendan Sorsby?
That's the reported number. I have no idea if that's, he leads them to a playoff berth, if he is, if there's nuggets in that deal that trigger if he is accomplishing things. But that $5 million number is what's being thrown around. But yes, I'm sure it's tied to some incentives, maybe making all Big 12 first team or a Heisman finalist. Maybe it's upwards of, it could be worth as much as $5 million. And to that, I say, good for him, man. Get it.
No, hey, who are we, man?
$5 million. He wasn't getting that from the NFL. So,
no. Well, on that note, Dan, let's do it.
Dan, time, help. I need picks of the week.
Enough of this pussyfooting around. Let's talk some football, baby.
Okay, I'm ready.
We got two matchups here. We got one in the Verbo Fiesta Bowl on Thursday. We've got a second in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl on Friday. This, by the way, is a nice little bookend if you're a football fan, because we've got these two games to lead into the Super Wildcard weekend, which is going to span Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Of course, not an NFL show, but we are football fans here, if you're listening to this in some sense of the word. And so, yeah, off to a nice little start here with these two matchups, which both I think are super intriguing for different reasons. We've got one game on Friday, which is a rematch of the close game that we saw back in October up in Autzen Stadium. And then we've got the other on Thursday, which is, for my money, a clash of two super athletic teams that play different styles that have their own storylines surrounding the matchup. So, bigger picture, I'm excited about these two matchups. There aren't any of these two that I look at and I say, I give it the old hand wave. Like I can put that one off. If ever I could, given the fact that we do this full time. But
right.
Both of these matchups I think will command our full attention.
Agree. And a wild foursome. Obviously, there has been some attention paid to the fact that each of these head coaches has ties to Nick Saban, right? Mario Cristobal is an offensive line coach, Pete Holding, defensive coordinator. Dan Lanning was a GA there. Kurt Signetti, I want to say a receivers coach, maybe a recruiting coordinator early on in Saban's tenure. But yeah, if we had preseason looked at this as a final foursome, I think a lot of people would have scoffed. And you know what? Good for these four. Weird paths. Obviously, teams like Oregon making their way back to this-ish stage. Indiana was a playoff team last year. This is a first for Miami and most certainly a first for Ole Miss. I know we will have our first college football playoff new champion this season, correct?
That's right. And among these four teams, both Indiana and Oregon are sitting on a big old goose egg right now in terms of how many national championships they've won.
Yep.
Ole Miss has one to their name, though it was a shared national championship, and it was way back when. And obviously some of those great Miami teams, in the late 90s, early aughts, that time period, that was the U, right?
Yes.
And going back into the 80s as well, this is a program that's got plenty of mystique attached to it and has won before, but it's been a minute. Yeah. So I think in the case of all four teams, it's obviously long overdue. Yeah. And there is a fair amount of excitement within each fan base to now get to this moment, to be on the doorstep of playing for a national championship.
By the way, I look forward to, if Miami were to win the national championship, having at some point in the spring, having Manny Navarro on the show and getting to once again ask him, what's it going to take for Miami to break through and win this ACC? What's it going to take? Still not happening.
Why don't we start there?
Yeah.
Why don't we start on Thursday, January the 8th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We've got the Verbo Fiesta Bowl. Speaking of Nick Saban connections, another one here with the Verbo commercials.
Oh, great. Yeah.
The number 10 seed Miami Hurricanes at 12-2 are a 3.5 point favorite against the number 6 seed Ole Miss Rebels, who come in at a mark of 13-1. Your over-under here is 52.5 points. Our friends in the desert expecting perhaps more points than we have seen in either of the previous two Miami playoff matchups. Of course, the Canes coming off a dominant win in the Cotton Bowl. They ate the Ohio State offensive line alive. And on the Ole Miss side, they're coming off that thriller in the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah.
I don't really know how else to put it. That was a hell of a game, 39-34. They end up knocking off the Georgia Bulldogs, the SEC champions, in a game that, speaking of things that commanded our full attention, that was right before we hit go. That was right before we published the episode. I was worried after a long day of not just watching football, but also being sick, that I wasn't going to have the appropriate amount of energy to really bring the juice when we did the recap. But whatever I lacked coming into that game, I got all of it from that game. Speaking of giving me life, good Lord, what a game.
You know, the
What a
word
game in the
hero
quarterfinals.
is thrown around too much, Ty. But for you to summon the energy to sit in a chair and talk about football,
I know.
I don't know, man, Ty.
I know,
People don't
I know.
appreciate you like they should.
Bigger picture,
Yeah.
30,000 foot view, zoom all the way out, Dan. Miami versus Ole Miss. What are the key themes that come to mind for you?
Well, I think the obvious identifiers for both of these teams are, Miami with power and Ole Miss with speed, which makes me think whatever Ole Miss can show in terms of power and whatever Miami can show in terms of speed is ultimately what decides this. And there are clear reasons why both of these teams can win. We saw, sort of thrilling games that came down to it, maybe more so in the Ole Miss, Georgia back and forth, and Miami just sort of closed out Ohio State super impressively. But they're both tested with close games. They're both, the reasons are sort of simple for each of these teams, right? That Ole Miss can score on, I wrote down, I won't use language here, but like they can score on F and anyone, right? They go to Oklahoma and score, mid 30s. And that's sort of been their thing. I guess the only team that's really slowed them down is Washington State, but like, come on, it's Wazoo. They're going to do that to everybody. Was like 24-21, right? That was just like a down off week, a sleepwalking week for Ole Miss. And Miami has shown that it can shut down pretty much anyone, right? When they're fully operational and focused and locked in, what they did to Ohio State, by and large, was crazy impressive. Now, Jeremiah Smith got loose, and there were times where Ohio State was able to move the ball. But to hold that team down like they did, you have your classic, offense against defense, and then you flip it to see, who's able to do the other thing well enough to play a complete game. And so what I wrote down here for Miami in terms of why they can win is their defense is absolutely gnarly up front. And if that's your starting point, you're in an incredible place. They don't try to play outside of themselves on offense. We saw that against Ohio State. They weren't taking a ton of shots. They barely took any shots, basically, right? Ohio State was playing off them, so they just took what was there and converted third downs. CJ Daniels was clutch in that game. And I think Miami is playing in a confident way, right? After going to College Station and beating Texas A&M in a low-scoring game that they were able to close out late, and then beating Ohio State the way that they did, closing that game out late. And when Miami is playing with that kind of juice overall, especially on defense, the path to beating them is pretty narrow. That's how I feel, especially if they're able to move the ball and sort of boa constrict the life out of anybody they're playing, like they did at times against A&M, like they certainly did at times in closing out that game against Ohio State. This is a nearly impossible out if Miami is up to the task. Is that all track?
I think so. I mean, what concerns me a little bit, and I think you're right to bring up the Miami defense. The Miami defense has been arguably one of the top three stories so far of this college football playoff, outside of what Trinidad Chambliss has done, outside of what Indiana did to Alabama and the shockwaves from that. But I think if you're Ole Miss, in order to combat this really aggressive front, you got to try and wear them down.
Yeah.
And I look at what happened in the previous game between Ohio State and Miami in the Cotton Bowl, and Ohio State played so slow.
Yeah.
They played so slow.
So you're saying wear them down as in like not necessarily like pound them into the ground, but tire them out, run them into the ground.
Try to like no huddle,
Speed them up.
NASCAR type stuff.
Mess with alignment.
I think you got to get away from the snail's pace that we saw Ohio State play with, and you got to put these pass rushers in a position where they got to catch their breath.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that standpoint, I think it's a fundamentally different approach that we're going to see from Ole Miss on offense. We know that they would prefer to get into a shootout. Like, if you told Pete Golding after the fact that this game ended up being a track meet, he would feel pretty good about his chances of emerging victorious in this one. And I think that's the style that they would prefer. In order, though, to mitigate to some extent Reuben Bain Jr., Akeem Mesidor, a Miami front that is just a monster, you got to find some way to just wear those dudes down. So keep the offense on the field, play at the most aggressive, fast-paced tempo you can without breaking too many of your own tendencies, without playing outside yourself. first and foremost, I am looking for Ole Miss to play super quick. I think they got to do that.
Yeah.
That's the first thing for me on the bingo card, right? Let's see.
And by the way, both
how
of those
quick they play.
dudes, Mesidor and Bain, they played a good amount of snaps against Ohio State. They don't
did.
rotate a ton on the edge, which I guess why would you if their legs feel good and they're performing like they did? But, we're talking about, and this will be a theme for both of these games, we're talking about teams playing 15, 16 games overall if they make it to the national championship game. Legs matter. Put that on a shirt, Ty. Legs matter.
Legs do matter. Speaking of shirts, I got my Solid Verbal shirt on here.
Ty.
In addition to the hat, I'm a company man. The other thing that I would add, since we're talking about tempo, my key for Ole Miss here is something I'm calling Trinidad and Tempo Bago.
You better deliver, Ty.
It doesn't really work.
No, hold on. I'm giving you an opportunity to land the plane here. Go.
I've already talked about the tempo side of it.
Yeah.
But the Trinidad side of it, I think, is obviously the one people are going to fix in a little bit more on.
Uh-huh.
A lot of what killed Georgia was Trinidad Chambliss's ability to break, contain, and improvise.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the escapability side of it, which he's very good at, but the dude's a super talented runner. He really is. So I could see some sets where they motion Kawan Lacey out, show a 5-wide look, try to spread out this Miami defense as best you can, and then run a quarterback draw.
Right. And it wasn't his legs against Georgia. I mean, it was his legs in improvising and his athleticism, but he wasn't running the ball down the field or anything against Georgia. Yeah.
No, I mean, we saw a little bit of it, right? Because that's just who he is as a player. But ultimately, what killed Georgia was the same thing that killed Georgia the first game, which was Trinidad improvising.
Yes.
Getting outside the pocket, stretching the defense in weird ways, and finding a guy that's open. So I think we're going to try and, if you're Miami, you're going to try and stop that, obviously. But if you're Ole Miss, you want to see more of it. And if Miami doesn't let you do it, you got to manufacture a way to put this guy on the run or get him outside the pocket or give him a chance to create some of those improvisational moments. I am really excited to see what they can do here. I think the playmaking of Trinidad Chambliss is ultimately what you're leaning on if you're Ole Miss. If you think you can win this game, I don't think it's because you believe you're going to be able to stop Miami when Miami has the football. I don't think it's because you believe that you can get into any kind of slugfest and win.
Yeah.
I think it is relying on the arm and on the legs of right now your best offensive weapon, which is Trinidad Chambliss. So whatever you can do to put your best playmaker in a position to make those plays, that is the key for Ole Miss. And you might be listening to this and saying, well, duh.
Yeah.
Obviously. And sometimes the simplest answer is the best answer.
Yep.
That is what they need to do if they want to win this game. Trinidad and Tempo Bago.
Trinidad and Old Trago. I was like trying to like Trey Wallace. I don't know. We'll get there. You made an attempt, and I can't hate that. You took a swing.
Yeah.
Look, I think what Ole Miss has is they've got nothing to lose here, right? There are expectations the second Mario Cristobal steps on campus that he gets this team back to here. Lane Kiffin had those expectations last season with how active they were in the portal and Jackson Dart returning. This is borrowed time for Ole Miss right now, right? They lose their head coach, and it doesn't matter. They actually beat a team that they lost to with the head coach, right? There's questions about, like, are all of their assistants going to be in the stadium for this game? Well, they'll
I
have
still
their
don't know the
defensive
full
coordinator.
answer to that. By the way, we're recording this Monday afternoon.
Yeah, we don't know the full answer. So this is as of Monday midday.
Yeah.
There is a question about who is and won't be there or won't be game planning because they're at LSU with portal stuff going on. And that's true for a lot of these programs and some of these programs that are playing here. But they're playing loose and confidently, right? They are able to get over the Georgia thing. They are now established as the 2025 SEC Alpha, right? Last man standing is Ole Miss.
Yeah.
The concern I have is not that I think it's going to be a letdown, because you're a better team than that being let down if you're able to beat Georgia in New Orleans. But man, that had to have been an emotional roller coaster, and the come down from that, I think, is very real, right? Beating Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, given the circumstances with Lane Kiffin, given the changes behind the scenes, guys leaving, like, it's just, it's a lot to deal with this far into a season.
Oh,
and
my
so
God, yeah.
I just got more of a sense, and this is my own thing. I can't attribute this to anything specific, that Miami beat Ohio State and they sort of took the Mario Cristobal, like, awesome, let's keep rolling, right? That there was just like, that was more of a business move. And Ole Miss is just floating on air because this was never expected given the circumstances that, unfurled at the end of the year. So like, I think Miami might be more locked into the moment. And that, for me, that is the edge in this one.
I do worry a little bit, though.
Yeah, please.
That Ole Miss is playing, to your point, with reckless abandon, given circumstances and, house money, whatever you want to say. I do worry that there's a little bit of varsity blues going on here, where, like,
continue.
They're going to play this one to F over Lane Kiffin. Like, you left us.
Well, sure. And that's how they have been playing. But yeah.
I worry about weird psychological stuff like that of course has no basis in any mathematics.
Right.
But I just worry from like a mentality standpoint that they're like, F this guy. We're going to win with Pete Golding. We're going to win with whatever pool of assistants wants to stay here and be part of this run. And that's not really the type of thing that you can account for when we're looking at stats and schemes or anything like that. I mean, they clearly came into that game against Georgia with an axe to grind.
Yeah.
And the way they closed that thing out was almost the complete opposite of the way they closed out the first one when they played Georgia earlier in the year. So there is part of me that wonders, like, how much of that is actually going to come into account here when these teams square off on Thursday night.
You can't block Ruben Bain with good vibes.
I know.
That's the thing.
You can
it's
try
all
to tire
well
him
and
out,
good.
but yeah,
right.
the vibes aren't going to block him and stop him from sacking your quarterback.
Right. And, Akeem Ezra, any of these guys, that they're just relentless, right? If they're able to force those 3rd and longs, if they're able to force Trinidad Chambliss into improvising and not being able to get the corner, or that Miami's secondary is in a place or is better coached than where Georgia's was last week, it could be a long day. I have basically the same stuff that, like, the case for Ole Miss is, like, they have the more dynamic quarterback and offensive weapons, plural. Yeah. I think Malachi Toney's still that guy, but, they protect Trinidad Chambliss. He's able to protect himself with his athletic gifts. And when they have the ball, right, I think your tempo thing is on the money. I think it's be creative in the run game because you're not going to be able to be super direct with going straight at this Miami defense. And then I think even a bigger deal is this defense is good for Ole Miss. It's not excellent. It's good. Not everything it could be, I suppose. And not everything it perhaps was last season. So if you can concoct a formula to have Carson Beck see those ghosts, right? And I don't think they're going to have him responsible for going through a ton of progressions and going 5 wide and making tough, like, I think they're going to take what's given to them. And I think they're going to try to pound the ball because Ole Miss doesn't stop the run consistently, and go from there and convert red zone appearances and stop Ole Miss in the red zone to the best of their ability and try to win this game and shorten this game to the best of their ability. I think, everything holds true for Ole Miss on offense, where it's just like, if Trinidad Chambliss is able to convert those improvised plays into back-breaking 3rd downs, that's sort of the theme of both of these games, by the way. Like, who's able to convert and stop back-breaking 3rd down opportunities. I think it's just going to be enormous here. But I give the edge to Miami. I give the edge to a defense in these spots. Again, I don't know what the legs are going to be like, and I don't know how well Ole Miss is going to stress those Miami legs. But I think Miami is playing with a certain amount of confidence, and I just come back to, in these games, eventually the large humans decide it. And I just come back to Miami having the better large humans to me. And it will take a little bit of pixie dust for Ole Miss to me, right? If it's a pick six, if it's a scoop and score, whether it's 3 short fields, whether it's the Malachi Toney fumble luck, not, continuing as it, he dropped a couple balls against Ohio State, but he dropped it right to himself. that, maybe the universe evens things out a little bit turnover-wise. It is a certain point thing for me with Miami and eventually squeezing the life when they are fully operational out of the teams that they play, and I'm going to go with that here.
What's your final score?
77-72. No. I wrote down 23-21.
Okay, so lower scoring. But
Lower
you're taking
scoring.
the points. You're taking points, notably.
What is it, 4.5?
3.5.
3.5. Okay. Yes, I am taking points. I do think it'll be back and forth, but I'm going large human here.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm worried about on the Miami side, totally separate from tempo, which I do think we'll see from Ole Miss.
Yeah. By the way, 14 offensive points against Ohio State.
That's right.
Should be noted. Yeah.
They got to figure out a way to keep Trinidad Chambliss in the pocket.
Yes.
And part of the reason why I liked Ole Miss last week, though I didn't predict him to win outright like you did, but we both took points at a minimum.
Mm-hmm.
The first time he played against Georgia, that's what killed him. His ability to get outside the pocket and make plays and improvise just pulled the defense apart, and he's very good at that. So, saw it again. My hunch is that Ole Miss would just, love to keep doing that.
Yeah.
So with these edge guys screaming off the edge, trying to sack him, there is obviously a risk that he's going to break contain and he's going to do the same thing. They got to figure out a way to not let him do that. Because if he does, that could be an issue. And to me, that's, I think, what I'm going to be watching for the most outside of the tempo is, can they keep this guy from just getting outside that little cocoon and killing him?
Yep.
But totally separate from that,
Mm-hmm.
one of the other ways that you could play defense against a team that would love to get into a track meet is to slow the game down. Slow it down. Almost the opposite of what I think Ole Miss is going to try to do to Miami. Miami should just do kind of what Ohio State tried to do to them. And I think they do that by getting Mark Fletcher going. You mentioned it. Ole Miss does not have a spectacular run defense by any stretch. Thus far, Mark Fletcher's come up huge in their first two playoff games. This should be another opportunity for him to eat on the ground.
Jarmar late, yeah.
So if they can get, as an extension of that, Ole Miss to maybe overcommit a little bit, try to stop him on the ground, maybe that opens up some opportunities over the top. By the way, this is the kind of matchup that I think is very ripe for a flea flicker or a halfback pass or something like that if you can get the ground game established on the Miami side of things. I'm not an offensive coordinator. I just play one on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's something that we could see them do. We know that they've got a few of those in the bag.
Of course.
For me, it's really a question of, do you trust the quarterback with the hot hand, or do you trust the defense with the large humans that feels like it is playing with a ton of momentum right now?
Yep.
And I am going to take the defense.
Yeah. By the way, Georgia has terrific large humans as well, and it ultimately didn't pay off.
It didn't.
So
it didn't. I think Miami controls the lines. I like the fact that they've got a veteran quarterback who has not been playing outside of himself at all.
Right.
I don't think this is a rock fight, nor do I think it's a shootout. I think it's 27-24 Miami. I guess that means I've got Ole Miss covering. I think it's the same score that Miami beat Notre Dame by back in week 1.
Ooh, some poetry.
A little bit of poetry there. The other thing that I would add here, and I thought about this a lot, and I didn't really know the best way to articulate it, but if you watch the game, or if you go back and watch the Ole Miss game against Georgia, despite the fact that Trinidad Chambliss was amazing, and Ole Miss and their offense came on like a freight train in the second half, there were plenty of moments in that game that were frustrating as hell on the Ole Miss side. And I spoke to it when we did the recap, but the time management at the end of the first half, there were drops, there were missed tackles. There were plenty of moments in that one for Ole Miss, despite the fact that they won and everybody's high on Pete Golding and the Rebels right now. There were plenty of moments in that game where it was like, if they want to win this thing, they got to shore this up.
Mm-hmm.
And they got away with it against Georgia because the offense and Trinidad Chambliss were incredible. But I don't know if you get away with it against a defense like Miami's. So I'm on the Canes here. I'm on the Canes, I guess not to cover, but to win outright in what should be a good game.
I agree.
I'm really excited about this one. I don't think this is a blowout one way or another. I think if it ends up being a shootout, Ole Miss wins. If it ends up being a rock fight, Miami wins. I think it's somewhere right in the middle, and I think it's close. So give me 27-24 Canes.
Look, it's taken, usually 30-plus points to beat Ole Miss.
Yeah.
And so we have this as lower scoring, and these things happen, and the rhythms change for these games and these teams and these seasons. By the way, you alluded to it, and we talked about it a little bit, but, depending on how classically spiritual you are as a listener of this show, if you are a believer in college football gods, deities of some kind, Lane Kiffin walking away from an eventual national champion is the funniest possible outcome if you're going to believe in that kind of power.
The occult forces of Lane Kiffin.
Saying he wants to coach through the national championship, but developing over years upon years and hitting the portal and hiring coaches and hitting the recruiting trail, whatever, to help build this team, and then take the LSU job right before they win a national championship and he's not a part of the playoff journey, is the funniest possible spiritual outcome to all of this.
I would agree with that completely. Yeah.
So if you are a true believer in the college football gods, there is only one pick.
If you have no dog in this fight,
right?
And you got any bets, you don't got any picks, you're just sort of a passive observer. If you're rooting for the funniest possible outcome, I agree. That's probably it.
Lane Kiffin's sweating through these games like he's in hot yoga. Ty, by the way, if you're not watching on youtube.com/solidverbal, he is wearing a beautifully appointed pewter shirt. It's a light blue shirt that you're wearing right now. It looks I know you have trouble with shades and colors with your corneas, but that's an Ole Miss-ish blue shirt you're wearing right now.
Yeah, it is.
That's all. Or Solid UCLA. Verbal. I don't know.
Go to solidverbal.com/store.
Yeah, there it is. So we agree.
We do agree. Let's go to the second game. This one played on.
I think we're good. One's plenty, Ty.
Are you nervous about this game?
Of course.
Oregon
what kind
guy?
Of fan would I be if I weren't nervous?
I'd be nervous as hell about this game if I were you. Friday, January the 9th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl down in Atlanta, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. This is going to be your Oregon Ducks, the number 5 seed at 13-1. Scoring off against the number 1 Indiana Hoosiers. Indiana comes in as a 4-point favorite. They are 14-0 on the year. Oregon, of course, off of that 23-0 shutout of Texas Tech in the Orange Bowl. Indiana off of just a total dismantling of Alabama, 38-3 in the Rose Bowl, Dan.
Yes.
I took some heat from your Oregon people about the way that I characterized the Oregon win.
That you disrespected the Ducks.
I took some heat.
Yeah.
I did.
That's okay. That means you're doing something right, Ty. You're getting people riled up.
I'm not trying to do that on purpose, but I'm trying to be honest.
I know.
I would be disingenuous if I weren't.
Yeah.
And so I saw a lot of geez, Ty, give us some credit for the shutout. And I thought I did. It was a very good defensive showing against, excuse me, I've still got this little lingering tickle here. An offense that was ripe for exposure. Excuse me. I got this. I think I need some water here.
That's, I think, a little bit rich.
You don't think they were ripe for exposure?
When looking at the quarterfinal quarterbacks, I was not in on Baron Morton as one who was among the best. But this was still an offense that performed this season. Did they not?
They did.
Were they one of the most explosive? Did they win all of their games by 30-ish?
They did, yeah. I think in terms of their cover points per game, they were covering by 14 points over the point spread or something like that. They've been truly to the point of good teams win, great teams cover.
Sure.
By that measure, Texas Tech has been a great team.
Yes. I don't think ripe for exposure is necessarily accurate. They got pounded.
Excuse me. Ripe.
Yeah. You're of course
ripe for exposure.
That's
how I would say it.
You're totally right, but I think you're wrong about which game involved the exposure. I think it was more Indiana exposing Alabama for who they've been longer rather than Texas Tech beating everybody 40-9 being a fraud.
I'm not saying they're a fraud. I'm not saying anybody's a fraud. But
okay.
I just
well, you used the term exposure. You're exposing Texas Tech as what?
I think Oregon was far and away the best defense they played.
Agreed.
And I think they got exposed for it.
Look,
and whether it was Baron Morton or their offensive line or whatever. However you want to characterize what we saw out of the Texas Tech offense.
Yeah.
They got exposed. They had 4 turnovers. Mm-hmm. It was the worst they've looked all year. And the Oregon offense, to their credit, was good enough to convert the mistakes into points. And they were able to press their advantage through the air. Maybe not as much with Kenyon Sadiq as I expected, but certainly their other tight end, Jamari Johnson, was very, very good in this game.
Yep.
But it's not like they could run the ball. They made a bunch of dumb mistakes on offense.
Totally.
And forgive me, Oregon people. By the way, I've picked Oregon literally every game this year, both against the point spread and against the opponent outright.
You took them against Penn State?
I did.
Oh, okay. I don't remember. I can't remember that far back.
So forgive me for picking them in every other game.
That's okay.
But coming away from this one with a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. I have a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. Even though they won 23-0. I think it was like the first shutout in the 12-team playoff era or something like that. Like, undeniably, a great win to get to this point.
There's
I'm sorry
more you
if
can
I'm
add.
That guy. Say hello to the bad guy.
No,
but I
Ty.
had a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. That's all. I'll shut up.
There's more you can add to your case. They scored 2 touchdowns against Texas Tech. One came on a 6-yard run after a strip sack from Mateo Uiagalelei, and then it was a 6-yard run from Jordan Davison. So a 6-yard offensive touchdown drive there. And then the second one was in garbage time when they wanted to be emphatic, right?
Yeah.
So they didn't have a proper touchtown drive.
Well, it was the top defense in the country, people have been saying.
I understand.
That's true. I'm just saying, if you want to be a national champion, if you want to be my latex salesman,
sure, of course,
I'm gonna need to see a little bit more Oregon. That's all.
I think that's all fair.
Sorry if I'm that guy, but we have seen this matchup before. By the way,
we have. And
These
to be clear,
played-
for the people who are hating on Ty Hildenbrandt, once for everybody in the back, even Whitney Houston will tell you, what did the Texas Tech offense get against Oregon, Ty?
Nothing.
Once again, what did this Texas Tech offense get against this Oregon defense in the biggest game of their program's history?
Play it.
Nothing.
There it is. Okay.
No, very good. So look, this is a rematch. They played back in week 7. Indiana won 30-20. That was on the road in Autzen Stadium, an incredible win. Certainly Indiana at that point in the season announcing that last year wasn't a fluke and that they were very much going to be part of the conversation in 2025. This was a good football game that was tied at 20 apiece until the back half of the fourth quarter. And now we step into this moment where obviously Indiana won the first time around, but it is the second time that these teams have played. If anybody knows how hard it is to beat a team twice, it's Dan Lanning. Am I right? Am I right, Dan Rubenstein? Give me a hell yeah.
Yeah, well, they couldn't even beat Washington once when they lost the repeat performance in the Pac-12 championship game a couple years ago. But yes, you're right. Hell yes.
So I'm curious your biggest takeaways from that first matchup, because, you know, we don't have the benefit of that with Miami versus Ole Miss, but we do in this one. And so I'm curious if you had a chance to go back and rewatch, even if you didn't, as you think back to that game back in week 7 in Eugene, what comes to mind?
On which side, or just in general, the rhythm
Just
of
in
that
general.
game? That Indiana was better prepared to win more moments on the road, and you know, it was, I think, off of a bye at home for Oregon, right? They had a bye after the Penn State game. Indiana, I believe, also had a bye before that game. Indiana came in more prepared to win those moments, whether it's Fernando Mendoza scrambling when nothing is there on third down, whether it's Fernando Mendoza in the passing game in the red zone, whether it was the defense feeling confident, especially up front, in confusing Oregon up front, confusing Dante Moore, in sort of staying the course after that pick 6, which I think tied it at 20-all, I want to say, late.
Start of the fourth quarter. Yep.
Right. And so they stay the course. They're on the road, Autzen Stadium, one of the more explosive atmospheres in the sport, is going nuts after Brandon Finney Jr. returns the pick six. And they don't waver, right? The defense doesn't waver. They know that they have to bow up, and they absolutely do, and they get the interceptions, and they close out the game in a strong way. And what they showed that day came to pass because before that, they were tested, I want to say, at Iowa, right? So their fourth quarter tested, and to do so at Autzen Stadium, given the ceiling of what Oregon's offense especially can be, and had been up to that point for the most part at home, I thought was crazy impressive. And they showed it the rest of the season, whether or not they were at home, whether or not they're on the road, whether or not they're in the Rose Bowl, whether or not they're in the Big Ten championship game. But I thought that was a great proof of concept for this year's iteration of Indiana. And from the Oregon perspective, I don't know if it's a letdown moment. They were just beat. I mean, they were beat up front. Dante Moore looked confused. If you go back and watch the tape, there were moments where he hit dudes down the field. I think it was like a long touchdown pass to Malik Benson. Moments he missed dudes down the field. They started running really well against Indiana. As like when Indiana's been tested this year, it's because teams have been able to run it. They've been able to get tough yards early on in drives, whether it was Iowa, whether it was Penn State, whether it was Ohio State, right? Ohio State also has Jeremiah Smith, which is helpful, Ty. You can write that down.
Does help.
Jeremiah Smith, helpful for an offensive cause. But if you can get going a little bit on the ground against Indiana and get yourself a bunch of third and manageable, I mean, this is true about anybody, right? If you can do that against anybody, you're in a good spot. And Oregon was able to do that at times. Jordan Davison ran really well against Indiana. Oregon was just in a fits and starts position, right? When it looks like they were driving, when they convert a key third down, they just come to a full stop. Indiana smothers them in the red zone, something like that. And so that's what there was a tightness to Oregon. There was a confusion to Oregon that day. And all of it is because of Indiana. All of it is because of Indiana's excellence that they proved over the course of this year. And it's why they're number one in the country. And so Oregon has improved since then, especially on defense. But so is Indiana.
Indiana. Yeah.
That's the intriguing thing to me is Oregon now has much more tape on Indiana. Oregon can self-diagnose what went wrong in that game, how they can correct it against anybody else, and how they can correct it against Indiana. Oregon's a little bit thinner in certain spots. You know, they're beat up along the offensive line. They were beat up at receiver. Indiana's down a couple key defensive linemen since then. I think it's Kellen Wyatt and Stephen Daly.
Didn't matter.
It didn't matter.
Didn't matter last week.
It hasn't mattered.
Yeah.
But these teams have grown since that game, and now they play in Atlanta, and it looks like a heavyweight bout. It looks like we could be watching a national championship caliber fight here.
It does. I mean, I went back and rewatched the game this morning. Indiana held Oregon to 3 of 14 on third downs.
Yeah.
So in those high leverage moments, to your point, Indiana was ready. They found a way to get the job done when it counted the most. Indiana was also in Dante Moore's face all day.
Yep.
I ran the numbers on it. 42 dropbacks. He was under pressure on 20 of them. Ended up getting sacked 6 times. Also, of those 42 dropbacks, Indiana blitzed 19 times. They did a much better job getting in his face than Oregon did up against Fernando Mendoza when they tried to get in his face. Much has been made about Mendoza and his ability to diagnose a defense post-snap, or if he does have some pressure. But what I don't think has been talked about enough is the ability of Indiana's line to give him a clean pocket.
Definitely.
And they spoke to this on the broadcast during the Rose Bowl. Was it the Indiana line that got the game ball or the trophy or something like that?
Yeah, there was a Notre Dame player in the playoff, and Pat Coogan, right?
Pat Coogan was there.
Yeah.
But when you've got a line that's this hard to confuse and a quarterback that is also this hard to confuse, that presents a real challenge. And so that to me was one of the most obvious disparities that we saw in that first matchup. Indiana's ability to get to Dante, Oregon's ability to get to Fernando.
Yeah. And his eyes were immediately down at the line, right?
That's right.
That he was immediately worried that there was pressure coming from somewhere that his line wasn't picking up and wasn't going through progressions because they forced that reality into his heart. They did.
The other thing that I'll add, if you go back again and watch that first game, Oregon played really tight pass coverage.
They did.
And Fernando Mendoza tried a bunch of back shoulder throws. Some of them were perfect. A few others were perfect enough to draw a pass interference call. And so as much as anything, and there were moments in that game that swung the momentum in favor of Oregon at one point, Indiana at another, but those pass interference calls definitely helped swing the game in favor of Indiana. By the way, this isn't me saying they were bogus calls.
Right.
For what it's worth, the refs missed another one that they didn't call.
Right.
So I'm not saying it was the wrong call, but if we're being complete about what helped tilt
they
things
were important moments.
In favor of Indiana, those were important moments.
Yeah.
So to the point on Finney had the 2 interceptions against Texas Tech a week ago. He had the big pick 6 in the first matchup between these two teams that, as you mentioned, tied it at 20. I think he will again have a rather large part to play in this matchup because we know Indiana is going to want to probably do a lot of the same stuff. In fact, one of the things that I had trouble with as I tried to go through here and pick out the keys to the game, I can come up with a bunch of them on the Oregon side, what they need to do different, how maybe they could get a little bit here, a little bit there. On the Indiana side, honestly, it's just do what you've continued to do all year.
Right.
Like, I don't know if they really need to do a whole lot different in this matchup in order to win. I think they just keep doing what they've been doing all season long, which is, to your point, be very prepared. To your point, be very disciplined. To your point, lean on Oregon until Oregon feels like they need to make a big play, like they need to play outside of themselves and capitalize on the moment. Indiana's formula here is not the sexiest, flashiest thing in college football right now.
Right.
Indiana's formula is, hey, we're going to be really efficient when we have the ball. We trust our guys. We joked at the top, they're a little bit of an older team. They are a little bit of an older team, but so what? They know what they're doing. They play extremely well together, and they're disciplined. And we're going to force you, whoever is on the other side, to be your most efficient in order to beat us. We're going to trust you to make a few mistakes to maybe help us beat you. This is what Indiana is very, very good at. There is a sense of inevitability when you're watching this team. And I almost hate to conjure up the spirit of like Alabama teams past, but we felt similarly about those teams when Saban was coaching, where it was like you just didn't know how, you didn't know what moments were going to be in store, but you just trusted that Alabama was going to find some way somehow to be right in that moment and get the job done.
Yeah.
And that's kind of who Indiana is right now.
There's a really, I've listened to a couple of interviews with players, top players who've played Novak Djokovic, like the all-time, and it was like, you kind of feel like you're in the match, right? There are quotes, they're like, you kind of feel like you're in the match, you're going back and forth a little bit, and then you just feel the water level keep rising.
Exactly. Like, if I want to make a golf analogy, Indiana
Please.
is Scotty Scheffler.
Yeah.
Scotty Scheffler is great because he doesn't make bogey.
Exactly right.
That is why Scotty Scheffler, he's not the best putter. He's not the longest hitter on tour. He's great with his irons, this is not a golf show, but he doesn't make bogey, and nor does Indiana. That's why they find themselves in this position as the number 1 team in the country.
Yep. Yeah, this is what I have written down. The case for Indiana. More consistent in most phases. Game plan and prep were extremely crisp for Alabama. Confident they can win after beating Oregon and Eugene. The efficiency and athleticism of Mendoza. High leverage excellence in the red zone. Third down on both sides.
Yep.
Fourth quarter tests, right?
got the
Ohio
same stuff.
State.
It's the same
Iowa.
stuff.
Yeah. Number
Same
1
stuff.
turnover margin team in America. They're deeper at receiver with Charlie Becker now as a major player. That he didn't. I don't think he had a catch in that first game.
No, but was definitely a threat against man coverage.
Definitely
against Alabama, obviously had a part to play there.
And I have feasts on teams that self-inflict wounds, which is what you just said. The other thing, by the way, is Indiana's playing against a team with 2 coordinators likely completely fried from working 2 big jobs each. That's not nothing, Ty.
No.
Right? We currently have Tosh Lupoy in Berkeley recruiting the portal, and Will Stein in Lexington recruiting the portal, hosting quarterbacks, hosting defensive linemen, hosting running backs, trying to figure out a way to put together a roster for a team hundreds, if not thousands of miles away from Eugene, Oregon, while prepping for Indiana, a heartbreaking loss the first time around. Not nothing.
So look, I would like to see Oregon lean a little heavier on the run game. You brought that up.
Same.
The rushing stats from the first game are skewed because of the sack yardage, but when you pull that out, Oregon's running backs were all averaging, well, not all of them, but
Jordan Davidson was over 7, right?
Collectively, yeah. Collectively, they were over 5 a carry.
Yeah.
Indiana doesn't give you big plays, so if you're going to score consistently, we talk about efficiency, it's going to be a bunch of 8 to 10 yard drives. You're not going to get a whole lot of 3 to 4 plays.
Yeah.
3 to 4 plays and you score a touchdown, unless you get a turnover or something like that. But it's a lot of 8 to 10 play drives. You got to be efficient. You got to be balanced if you want to beat them. And I thought the running game was there the first time around. I'd like to see them do a little bit more of that. The other thing that I would add, and I mentioned this before, Indiana doesn't want to give anyone time to throw. And they did a really good job the first time around against Dante Moore. I'd like for that Oregon attack to be a little less dependent on giving Dante time. Now, to his credit and to Oregon's credit, Dante has been getting rid of the ball quicker as of late. This is an area where he has improved, right? As we talk, these seasons are living, breathing things. Oregon and Dante have gotten better at that. And I'd say in general, I think Oregon still has better athletes across the board, better depth of athlete than Indiana. They just need to find a way to get those guys in space. They got to get more guys in space. More to the point on athletes, if we flip to the other side of the ball,
please.
Oregon did play super aggressive coverage. They were content to put their guys on islands because they believe in their athletic abilities. And so I still believe that's the case this time around. I think we're going to see a lot of the same stuff from Oregon. I would like 20% more discipline. 20%. Try to avoid 1 or 2 of those DPI calls that gave a free first down to Fernando Mendoza.
We have not seen refs with an itchy flag hand.
We have not.
This playoff. Like Miami had 0 penalties, I believe, against Ohio State. Is that true?
I mean, for
Which
a good
is a
chunk of that
wild
game,
number
there were
for
no
Miami.
penalties at all. Yeah.
Right. I think Ohio State ended up with 1 penalty. We just have not seen, and look, there were some very pro-Georgia refereeing moments in that Ole Miss game.
There were.
But by and large, we have not seen like 6 penalties for that team, 8 penalties for this team. We haven't seen holds called a ton. We haven't seen defensive holding. We haven't seen hands to the face. We haven't seen PIs a ton. There have been some procedural stuff, but in terms of letting the guys play, that may favor Oregon here.
Which I like, by the way.
Okay.
I like when they kind of take a little bit more of a backseat because we've seen far too many games this season. And I feel like the last 2 years have been especially bad with this, with officiating. Too many of those moments where you're watching the game at home, like, come on.
Right.
Enough of the ticky-tack stuff. So just something to watch for. But I do think you'll find Oregon defenders on islands again against these Indiana pass catchers, and I think that'll make for a really, really interesting matchup. They just got to be a little bit more disciplined.
Yeah.
A little bit more. On the Indiana side, again, keep doing what you're doing. Be ready for that aggressive coverage. I also think they can lean a little heavier on the run, too. They had some success, especially down the stretch when they were trying to salt the game away. I would like to see them lean a little bit more on that, but by and large, I don't really have any notes for Indiana. I thought Indiana had a really good game plan the first time around, and I think if they execute on that, they will again win because they feel more buttoned up to me. Like, with rare exception this season, it feels like the teams going up against Indiana inevitably end up desperate for a big play or two. And that's what they're hoping will shift the momentum, whereas Indiana is just kind of content to play their game and do their thing.
Right.
And there just aren't many examples of teams that were able to effectively take Indiana out of their rhythm. Iowa kind of did it. Penn State definitely did it, weirdly enough. But again, there is a distinctly Alabama feel to this team that gives me that sense of inevitability. I think Indiana wins this one as well. I've got it at 27-20, right on the number.
Okay. So what do you think? You think it's just a similar, I mean, that's nearly the same score as the first time, right? It was 30-20. You think it sort of goes the same way, that
I think
Oregon's
it's a very
not able
similar
to
game.
effectively adjust? Okay.
A very similar game.
All right. That's fair enough. I don't have a strong case against it. This is what I have down, by the way, for the case for Oregon. They just fully shut out a highly performing team in the college football playoff. The defense seems to be at its best, playing with a higher ceiling than they were in the first matchup. So is Indiana. Wide receivers are healthy. The second tight end, Jamari Johnson, has emerged as a legit weapon as they play. They play a lot of 12 personnel. There actually is like a lot of similarities between what Oregon, I think, stylistically would like to do on offense with where Georgia was. They don't have the high-end talent on defense that Georgia had. But in terms of rotating in running backs, using multiple tight ends, and just trying to suffocate teams with, serving the defense, there's something there. Indiana's playing a third straight team with very high-level talent. I don't know if that means anything to you. This is a game, it's Ohio State, then Alabama, then Oregon. Now, I happen to believe Alabama's not all that much.
I mean, Indiana won that game by 35, and it could have been more. So it clearly did not have too much of an impact on the Hoosiers.
Yeah, but the question is also, could Virginia have won that game against Alabama? 28-14. Like, that's, and no disrespect to either of those teams intended, but like,
right.
Alabama, with the way that they finished out the season, Ty Simpson not doing anything against Auburn and then essentially scoring a garbage time touchdown in the SEC championship game, right? And Alabama beat Oklahoma. You should give them credit for that. But there is something to like, is Alabama the Alabama brand worth celebrating in the same way? I suspect no.
And by the way, Alabama fans would probably agree to that too.
Alabama fans are the first people to tell you how much they hate this year's Alabama team.
It's not even a take, but continue.
Oregon has had the advantage of having the time to diagnose and address where they came up short against Indiana the first time. It's pass protection, red zone coverages, whatever. They've improved their havoc allowed since then. They're the number one EPA rushing team in America. I can go through stats. It's kind of boring to do so. But they're excellent at generating and stopping big plays, excellent at avoiding and generating 3 and outs. And it's, once again, it's difficult to beat a strong team twice in the same season. And if you're going to look at Indiana as excellent, which I think is accurate, they're not unbeatable. They've been in games against average to pretty good teams this year. That Ohio State game was extraordinarily losable and went on to prove that Indiana has a winning instinct, that winning is a skill that Indiana possesses. That was a close game late, and we could be talking about a very different draw for Indiana, where they're, getting Miami in a previous round. And it's just a different look. They're not 2019 LSU. They're not beating everybody by 35. And so I don't think they're perfect. I think they're excellent. And so I think Oregon, if they are eat off the floor clean on offense.
Right. Eat off the floor clean. That's good.
Eat off the floor clean. And they have to play Fernando Mendoza when he is off platform well, right? They're going to have to, instead of Fernando Mendoza rushing for a first down, scrambling for a first down on 3rd and 6, he has to dip out of bounds as he's throwing the ball away. Though, again, back-breaking 3rd down conversions or stops, I think, is this entire game. I think Oregon should be okay, not perfect, but okay in handling pressure, even with what they weren't able to do on the right side of the offensive line against Texas Tech. I think that line's a little bit different. And I think Indiana's the better team. I truly do. I think they're more consistent in more phases. I think they're the better team. I think they're the more trustworthy team. But I also think it's nearly impossible to go 16-0 in this sport. Oregon's winning this game late, 20-17, on the foot of Atticus Sappington. Lord Sappington. I don't know how it gets there. I think it's low scoring. 20-17.
Noted unbiased Oregon alum Dan Rubenstein.
I have never claimed to be that. I have fully never claimed to be that. There's a over my right shoulder right there. There's a vintage Oregon Ducks hat.
Okay.
I am the first person to tell you how miserable I've been for stretches this year and all years watching Oregon football. But for whatever reason, I think if you want to have Dan Lanning in an ideal state, give the other team the betting odds. Make Oregon an underdog. If you want to channel like the inner post-Penn State Dan Lanning, the like inner Zangief of Dan Lanning,
right. The cocaine bear version that people post online.
Give Dan Lanning the ammo of saying you're a 3.5, 4.5 point dog.
Oh my God. He might bite the head off a live bird in the pregame.
Now that might also lead to Oregon losing this game by 30. But I'm saying if you're going to want the ideal aggro Lanning, make Oregon a dog in a huge spot. That's all.
We disagree, but I think in both cases, both the Miami Ole Miss game.
Do you think there's a letdown thing, by the way, for Indiana?
No.
Not that they won't be up. They're excellently coached, right? They are crisp and prepared at every turn.
I'm not big on letdowns after a blowout.
I'm not saying letdown like they're not going to be up for this game, like they're not going to be ready for this game. I'm just saying, compared to Oregon winning the Orange Bowl in front of 538 people at noon, that's a stretch. But it was not. I don't think it was a sold-out Orange Bowl.
No, there were empty seats.
And then Indiana, never playing in the Rose Bowl, beating Alabama in the Rose Bowl in L.A. I just think the stage was so much bigger.
It was a bigger stage. It was a bigger stage.
It's definitely a program benchmark to do something like that. Whereas, like, again, no disrespect to Texas Tech. Nothing. But I don't know how much, in 10 years are Oregon fans going to think about this as like an enormous win for this program. Whereas like Indiana fans, like, we beat Bama in the Rose Bowl. I can tell my grandkids about that.
I mean, I think you're right to bring it up, but I also don't think you can talk about how locked in Indiana is and expect that this is going to have any kind of lasting impact.
I'm just saying, if this were week 8, it'd be nonsense. But we're all talking about legs. We are talking about travel, and Oregon is now going to be, they have a little bit more of a rhythm because they'll play 3 straight games, whereas Indiana's had more of a time off. Obviously, it didn't have any effect on their performance in the Rose Bowl. But something I'm paying attention to just in terms of like how flat does Indiana look for the first 3 drives versus one drive, man. Something.
I mean,
again,
Fernando Mendoza talked about it a little bit, the rust factor for 2 drives, but I envision him right now sitting somewhere in Bloomington with like the metal spike in the back of his head, like out of the Matrix.
Totally
just sort of
reasonable.
Just absorbing everything that Oregon has done since their matchup back in week 7.
Totally.
I think he'll be ready. I think they'll be ready. And I think this should be a good game because Indiana's look great. This was a really good game the first time around.
Yeah.
It was a really good game the first time around. The only bit of separation came in the last 6 minutes and 52 seconds, whatever, of the fourth quarter. This is a good game between 2 good teams. I think the point spread reflects that.
Yeah.
If we get 27-20, if we get 23-21, if we get 2017, if we get whatever, I don't think it's going to be a 38-3 type of situation.
No.
Like we saw when Indiana beat Alabama in the Rose Bowl. So
I'm also seeing, by the way, there's just like a weird, and maybe it's, maybe it'll pay off. There's just like Indiana's a machine. They're going to win again. Right. Maybe it's my vantage point as an Oregon human. Right.
No,
but there is the look what they did to Alabama. They're a machine. They've already beaten Oregon. Can't wait to see who Indiana plays in the national championship. And when we get to that point where people are, picking Ohio State as they're number 1 or the number 2, but they're more battle tested, and look at Julian Sain and Jeremiah Smith, it's college football. And when we go too far down a road, assuming something about a team, this is Indiana's first time.
Especially this year.
This year.
Yeah.
And Indiana was number 2 for most of the season, right? They weren't the most hunted. They were a great story all season long. They were excellent all season long. But now they are in a new position this week of being the favorite to win the national championship, Indiana football. That's a new spot. Doesn't mean they can't respond and beat both their next 2 opponents by 21 each, but it's a new spot.
I think Oregon can win this game. I don't think they will.
Eat off the floor clean, Ty.
I think it would take an inspired effort, to say the least. But can Oregon win? Yeah, they can win. Think I'm an idiot? Of course they can win.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that we're going to get 2 really good games. And if we get 2 really good games, then we end up with a good matchup in the national championship, whoever those 2 teams are. That would be a great way to end the season. Again, we got these 2 semifinal games. Go on out to playbowlbingo.com. That is the URL. If you go there, you can sign up for our postseason game. So we've done 2 weeks of it thus far. We're giving away prizes to all the winners. It is free to play. All you got to do is sign up as a free member of our Patreon. Here is the way the game works. It's very simple. You get a list of 30 prop bets, a defined list of 30 prop bets for both of these games. You got to pick 6 that you think are going to hit.
No problem.
That's it. That's all you got to do. There's a tiebreaker, so, if we've got a multi-way tie, we can break it. But otherwise, you pick 6, and if you finish with the most and you win the tiebreaker in all likelihood, then you win a prize. Free to play. Very straightforward, very simple, all sorts of fun props to pick from. Thus far, though, we've had hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of entries in this. Only 4 people have gotten 6 out of 6 so far.
Wow.
So it's not that easy. It's basically a 6-way prop parlay.
Yeah.
But straightforward enough. Doesn't cost you a dime to play. All you got to do is sign up for free at playballbingo.com to be part of our Patreon. That's it.
Yeah. Love it.
All right. We appreciate everybody's support. It has been a long season. The season continues. Please hit follow. Please hit subscribe if you've yet to do so. We'd appreciate it to help support the cause here over at Solid Verbal headquarters. Of course, as we said at the top, we do need to pay a little bit of attention to what's going on in the transfer portal right now. Literally thousands of players have thrown their name in the ring. We are going to do an episode here. Our next episode will be one talking about the transfer portal, the lay of the land, where things stand, differences this year versus last, so on and so forth. So you have that to look forward to. We will drop that. Right now, the plan is to drop that at some point before these games are played. And then, of course, we will do recaps. Recaps to both of these games as we have done all throughout the course of the playoffs so far.
By the way, as we're recording this, and you can only hear it after the fact, do you have an Illinois State, Montana State -10 in the FCS National Championship game? Bill Connolly's going to be there.
Yeah, I saw that.
Bill Connolly's there. Montana State favored by 10, which would give Oregon a win over a national champion.
Yep.
Let us not forget.
I will go Illinois State plus the points.
Whoa. I'm going Montana State. I feel good about Montana State. We'll talk some bowl games, by the way, on a future episode. We've had some fun and interesting
There's
results.
a lot to talk about, man. There's a lot to talk about.
It's coaching moves.
Yeah.
There's, you mentioned portal stuff. There's a lot to go through.
We haven't talked about assistant hires.
No.
Obviously, the portal. I'll bring that up again. We have to talk a lot about that. But before long, there will be draft declarations, which I think could be very interesting, especially given maybe not so much on the quarterback side this year, but certainly other positions that will be affected. Certainly now as we talk about so much coaching movement, how that affects draft declaration. There's a lot. There's a lot going on. So just because the season is going to be over in like 2 weeks from now, whatever, that doesn't mean we're going to have any shortage of things to talk about. So we appreciate it.
Hey,
if you stop on by.
Wisconsin just won the national title, Ty. Wisconsin River Falls won the D3 national title. And I saw their quarterback recruited his coworker at a bar and grill who is a basketball player to join the football team and was like a contributor. So,
and Big Wisconsin. I don't know if that's the right way to classify them.
Big Wisconsin. The big one is River Falls right now.
Wisconsin at Madison got Colton Joseph, the quarterback from ODU, which by all accounts is a great prospect in the portal.
Ran all over Indiana.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Everybody's trying to beat Indiana now. All right.
That's true.
Let's leave it there. Again, you know how to support the cause. Hit follow, hit subscribe, tell your friends. Going out to playballbingo.com if you want more info on how to join our game. We've got this week, we've got next week left in the game. Again, totally free to play. We would encourage everybody to stop on by and check that out. Dan Rubenstein.
Yes.
I will talk to you in a day or so. We will do another episode. I, of course, will talk to you in the immediate aftermath of both of these playoff games. But in the interim, that guy over there, Dan, for myself, Ty, for the millions of our ballers listening and watching at home, you know the drill. Stay solid.
Peace.